Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to continue our quest on the backend development for the login and sign up full PHP and MySQL system. So yesterday I showed you how you can validate your front-end forms using JavaScript and the constraint API. So I went ahead and added those validations over here. So if I press login, it asks for a username and a password for password. I'm still at the end of this tutorial going to go ahead in the code and show you how I added these, but you can kind of get a gist of it if you watched the tutorial yesterday. I'm going to put the link in the description. So the idea is that if I go ahead and type the correct username front end tips, but a wrong password, like something that I know is wrong, it's going to say username or password invalid. But if I go ahead and enter the right password, in this case is password, and we created this password using the sign up section before, um, it will actually, let me just do front end tips and then password, login. It's going to go ahead and redirect to the endpoint that we created in the last tutorials with slash username. So here we have a slash user that says welcome back. What we can do is we can go ahead and also append the session username here so that it says welcome with the username that we have. And later on in the following tutorials, we're going to create a complete dashboard, admin dashboard over here. But you can see that initially, if you're not logged in, it's going to say we are not, the user is not authorized or you're not authorized. But otherwise, it will say welcome back and the username that the person or the visitor logged in. So far so good. Today I want to talk a little bit about the design decisions and principles that are really important for generally for software development. But now, since we have backend development, I'm just going to talk about it here in the scope of this project. So if we take a look at the login endpoint, what we do is that we get the username and password from the backend. We use the Redbean PHP uh, library to basically call to check if the username exists and also verify that the password matches the password they have sent. And then we basically return a status true or otherwise we return status falses, right? So if you show this to a senior software developer, they're going to call this code crap if they're nice enough. And the reason being that, see, here the concept over here when we use app post login and pass the function, this is really how you define it using the Slim framework. So the concern here is actually based on how you define a route in the Slim framework. In some other languages, or sorry, in some other frameworks, it might be the same, it might be a little bit different. So what I want to show you is that now we have a couple of concerns over here. The first concern is the definition of this, which is basically based on the definition that we know in a Slim framework uh, is defined. The next thing is that right within this handler or controller, as we call it, or the route handler where we get the request and we can send back the response, in here, we not only get these things, which is username and password, which is again the concern of the framework, Slim framework we use, because we are literally using the request object that they provide. But now suddenly we also our concern becomes the database as well. And also the logic that we actually verify and setting the session as well for the username if the password and username is correct. So now look at the change that I make here. What if instead of these kind of logic, which makes this function a little bit long, what if we have a call, we have an object called auth, and then we just say validate, and then we just pass a username and a password that we get from the parameters, and we assign it to a variable. So basically, this function call will return true or false. Now, instead of returning like this, we can go ahead and return here just one response with JSON status and a valid here, which will be uh, sort of false or true. Now, for the moment, I'm going to just remove this code. Not that we implemented this But see the difference now suddenly, how nice and clean this handler will become. The only concern it has is that it does get the parameters from the request, but then and also it returns the response. But then here is the what we call business logic of our application. This is really the logic that we implement, and this should be something that we can easily move it to another framework. So say instead of a slim framework we use another framework, we can easily just move this business logic to there and we're still going to get the same result because the logic will be encapsulated within this validate, right? So now how are we going to make this happen? So here I already created an app folder. So we have an app folder within the SRC. So go ahead and create that. Within the app folder, I created an auth folder. And within the auth, I created our auth class. And now we're diving a little bit into object-oriented programming and the definition of how we create a class. So here, as you can see, I created an auth class. And then within the auth class, I created a namespace. So this is unnecessary. So the namespace is the name of our application capitalized. So app here in the SRC, and then auth, and then we create our class. And then you can see that I literally created a public function validate passing the username and password, and then pasted the logic we had here in our index.php, which I removed. If you take a look at signup, the logic is still there. So I basically pasted it within the validate function. And the only change I made, because we have defined a namespace over here, the only change I made is change this R to \R, because if you don't do that, it will look for the R within the namespace that is defined in this class. So by using that, you'll say, okay, use the global sort of namespace, which is /R. And if you remember, we required this redbin PHP here, and then we set it up to connect to our database, right? So far so good. Now, how the application knows how to load this. So in order to do that, we have to go to the composer.json and add a new key here. We call it autoload. And actually it's called autoload. And then within this autoload, it's an object, and this object contains a key, which is a convention that is a PHP convention called PSR4. And then PSR4 will contain another key, and this key is basically where do we want the dependency management to know where our files are to be able to auto load them in our project. So we're gonna say app slash, since it's a script, we have to escape it. So slash backslash, and then the value of it will be where the directory of our application is, right? So I'm just going to say app, right? So now you can see that we not only simplified this handler to just 4 lines of code, but also we moved away the business logic of our application, which should be independent from the logic that the Slim framework acts upon, into the new class called auth, and then we validate. And here you can see that in order for our application to be able to do this operation, as we did it with the view here, as you can see, we have to create we have to say container, and then auth is actually a function passing the container to it, and this will return a new instance of app slash auth backslash auth class, right? So now you can, it's just going to go ahead and put the semicolon. You can see that we added the instantiation of that object, of that class. So we created a new object or a new instance of that class that we can use in our application, and we assigned it to the container.auth. And in Slim Framework, when you say container, when you put the auth in the container object here, uh, it basically gets accessible through this.auth, right? So if I save this, go to the postman again, and try to run this again, you'll see that it now says undefined constant app.namespace. The problem is that here, if I go to auth class, this should actually be something like this. Sorry, not this, but like this. So we have namespace app slash auth. So now if I go ahead and send it, you can see that it starts working. I had to actually save this file. So now we see status true, and if I choose a wrong password, you'll see that we get status false. So now, in order to do the same thing for the sign up endpoint, so we have the sign up endpoint, so you can see a lot of, dependencies and logics within our handler. We want to make it simplified. So I'm going to just copy this. I'm going to say this auth and then call a sign up function and then pass the username and the password here. And then I will assign this to a variable called signed up. Now the only thing I need to do is basically copy one of these and then say status will be signed up. Now I would copy all this code from here. You can see how simplified and clean this endpoint become. Now here in our auth.php, I'm going to go ahead and create a new public function, and we set it public because it need to be accessible but by whoever instantiate this class. So I'm just going to say sign up, passing the username and password here. And now if I go ahead and paste this code, set the indentation to be correct, and obviously go ahead and add the backslash for wherever I use R here. And then instead of returning like this, I'm just going to go ahead and return true in this case, meaning that we were able to sign the user up, and then return false if we couldn't, right? So now you can see that we also added the business logic of our application for authenticating within this method that or the function we defined in auth. Going back here, you can see that how simple and easy our code looks like. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this sign up before the login so that I understand the flow in my application. So first sign up, then the user logs in, and then we have an endpoint or in our application called slash user where we, based on if they are logged in or not, we show the correct answer. So now if I go ahead back in my browser, let's go back to the local localhost root. Now I'm going to create a new user. I'm going to call it frontend tips maybe 5 and then give password and then password and sign up. Right now you can see that what happened was not it actually very good because it actually refreshed the form. Now we have to add the validation for the sign up. Going back to our code in the index.php, we already have a sign up, but in JavaScript, we need to make sure if I go to public scripts main.js, what we did was to add the submit listener for the login. I can go ahead and add the same thing for the sign up, right? So I'm just copying this. I just say sign up form. I want to make sure that I already basically have a reference to the sign up form, which I have over here. So perfect. And I know that I have sign up username, and also I'm just going to go ahead and select all of these. Sign up, sorry, not like this. Here I have the sign up form, sign up username, copy this, paste sign up username, sorry, this one, sign up username and sign up username. And then I have the sign up password here. Sign up password, sign up password, sign up password. Almost everything is the same. The endpoint that is different is literally sign up instead of login. If we go to index.php, we can see that it's sign up. And going back to our JavaScript, what are we going to do instead of, we can check this. If we got something unsuccessful, we can show something to the user. But for now, I'm just going to copy this and just console log the data. It's actually a practice for you now that you learned how to add this. Maybe go ahead and change this in your project so that you have a proper notification to the user and do, some action based on the return of this. So for now, if I go back to my project, if I do front end tips, let's say 6, give it a password, I'm typing password and sign up. You'll see that it gives me the status true, which is good. Now if I go back here, I type front end tips 6, give it a wrong password. I just type password 1 instead. It says it's incorrect. But if I say password, which I created using sign up, you'll see that it actually redirects me and say welcome back front end tips. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. In the next episode, we're gonna go make it even cleaner. We add other stuff and we're gonna start creating an admin dashboard with a lot of UI components and a lot of cool interactions. So if you have any idea of what to build in that admin dashboard, please go ahead and put it in the comment section. If you have any questions or concerns, again, comment section is your friend. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do. This channel is gonna rock. We're gonna create a lot of nice tutorials over 2019, pretty much every day. So far, I haven't gotten bored or tired. I'm very happy since you guys are supporting me, and let's get this going. I wish you a great day and night, and see you next time. Goodbye.